actually in man himself is the whole of the Hermetic mystery. That all these books are therefore veiled accounts attempting to preserve, down through the corruptions of world conditions, the same esoteric doctrine that was taught in the sanctuaries of Greece, Egypt, and India. Yet a new language has been developed and devised. And now Miss Atwood points out one of the interesting and important parallels, namely that this new language that was developed by the alchemists and was gradually taken over by the chemists is the language of a scientific salvation. That in these formulas and rituals, it is no longer simple piety that accomplishes the works. That man is actually capable of a voluntary cooperation with nature in the advancement of all of the works of light. She then hazards something that may seem a little difficult for us to comprehend, but I believe that basically she is right. Namely, that the works of light possible to man include not only the improvement of his own nature, but ultimately the regeneration of his world. That actually these works of man represent the power to use light, not only to cleanse the body, the soul, and the spirit, but to cleanse all of nature, to cleanse the air, the earth, the fire. That it is perfectly possible for man to charge the very energy fields of his planet, just as he is charged himself by these fields, and that man, by the development and perfection of his own life, makes all things new again in the world around him, and in this way fulfills the promise that from his own righteousness there shall come a new heaven and a new earth. That the alchemical mystery, therefore, is a kind of chain reaction, and we are beginning to appreciate that such a thing might be conceivable when we begin to think in terms of nuclear physics. We are now in the position where we realize the tremendous energy forces can be loosed, which have an incredible and unknown effect upon not only living things, but upon the very fountains of life, the sources of...
Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we continue with our little tome on weather control. And I am continuing to read from Chapter 5, a book entitled Toward the Year 2018. Chapter 5 was written by Thomas F. Malone. And Thomas F. Malone was the chairman of the Committee on Atmospheric Sciences of the National Academy of Sciences and vice president and director of research of the Travelers Insurance Company. This book was published back in the 60s. How Man Will Control the Weather. At the risk of oversimplification, and with the usual caveats about fallibility, the present position and some judgmental evaluations of the future prospects for weather modification can be summarized as follows. Number 1, field results have demonstrated unequivocally that several cubic miles of supercooled clouds, liquid cloud droplets at temperatures below freezing, can be transformed into ice crystal clouds by seeding with appropriate chemicals. The technology for performing this kind of weather modification will be perfected rapidly over the next decade. 1980s. Number 7. Physically reasonable approaches to the suppression of lightning have been tried. You'll have to excuse me, folks. I'm reading from a not a very clear copy. Let me start this paragraph over. Number 7. Physically reasonable approaches to the suppression of lightning have been tried with what appears, on balance, to be promising results. Progress on this highly localized modification measure will be retarded pending a satisfactory explanation for the lightning discharge produced, but the probabilities are high that operational techniques will be available by the late 1980s. Number 8, cloud seeding techniques that are of sufficient merit to warn field experimentation have been advanced for the modification of hurricanes. The limited tests have not as yet yielded even preliminary conclusions. This approach should be pursued vigorously, but the probability of success is not high, only about 50%. New concepts are needed, and they are likely to emerge from computer simulation of hurricanes for 5 years are allowed for the development of an adequate mathematical model. 5 more years for assessing the consequences of intervention of various kinds, and then 10 years of field experimentation for validation. It seems unreasonable to expect much before 1990, with the probabilities fair to good that a proved technology will exist by the year 2000. Now, I have to interject something here, folks. If you've been listening carefully, you'll see that all the predictions were for the completion of this technology and for the ability to perfect weather control in the 80s and at the latest by 1990. Now, I want you to ask yourself, when did all the strange weather patterns begin? When did the crazy storms start to come? When did hundreds and hundreds of tornadoes hit the Midwest out of all reasonable expectations? When did the flooding and the unbelievable droughts and the fires take place? All after 1990. Number 9, no technique for consciously influencing large-scale weather patterns.
Kind of a semiotic, where a cornfield as an organism of the world soul, or the Gaian soul, let us say, to particularize to planet Earth, the Gaian soul is trying to speak to us and find some language, so developing an alphabet little by little, just as we developed cuneiform.
You see, I think the best theory of them really would be that, as Ralph says, it's the world soul communicating to us. But if it turned out that, in fact, it were exactly what the most persuaded school of rationalist explainers believes it is, namely whirlwinds of a particularly focused kind, you suddenly discover they're right. Suddenly, whirlwinds can take on entirely new patterns of focus and write new patterns, and so that there's a kind of spirit behind the whirlwind that really expresses itself.
Well,
as many traditions have always believed.
The spiraline form of the whirlwind, a whirlwind is probably an extremely complex, organized entity. It's an expression of DNA. It's an expression of the ordering morphology of the galaxy. I would expect a higher
spiral,
it's a higher order form of life, but it still has a spiraline energy form. Well, maybe some kind of breakthrough is not far away. When these facts I recited about the early modern science and how all these guys were shaped in their ideas by converse with these entities, what would it be like to take that notion seriously enough to actually open a kind of embassy to the invisible, so that we could have commerce and treaties and exchange of patents and
yes,
that
shamans are ambassadors.
Well, that must be what in fact is going on, but
our God.